Welcome for more affordable fixed blade content. Seems like I have a new series going here, and hopefully it's a popular one, but in a previous episode I mentioned I'd acquired a few of Cold Steel's Lite versions of their premium fixed blades. They make these very affordable, buy while using a cheaper steel. Blades are often less beefy, less attention to, fit and finish, and usually just very simple plastic grips with, well, not full tangs in most cases, but not all cases we're going to take a look at. The one I've had the longest, though, is the Lite version of their Pendleton Hunter. Now, I don't have the premium one to compare it to. Also, had this for going on 14 years now, bought it at a time in my life where I wasn't doing, well, anything outside. All I was doing was working, and that's an indoor job. But this knife immediately found its job assignment in my kitchen, and it's been there ever since because it is an awesome tool. It's actually my favorite tool for finely cutting, trimming meat. Yeah, it's a meat cutting razor blade, and very ergonomic, and we'll talk about that. But I figure, okay, maybe it's time to take it out and put it through at least part of my testing regimen and see how it performs in other roles. I think it deserves that. So let's go ahead and take a closer look at the Pendleton Lite Hunter. I just looked up the current listing for this knife, and since 2010-2011, it does not look like Cold Steel's made any changes to the knife or the sheath. Now, a lot of their Lite series knives come in one-piece polymer sheaths that they talk about being made out of the same material as their Securix sheaths, like that's actually a good thing somehow. But this one comes in a taco-style nylon sheath. It's actually pretty thick and stiff. And then it's got a really simple and more flexible nylon belt loop. It's not very big, though. It'll fit on a standard size belt, but probably not anything wider. Now, this is where I admit, no, I have not carried this knife for any length of time. It has spent most of its time in the kitchen drawer, so the sheath is serving as a blade protector while it's in there with my other knives. Plan on rectifying that this week and see how it works as a carry knife. But speaking of carry knives, retention is created by having, nearly 3/4 of that grip down inside the sheath, which means in deployment, I can only get about a finger or two on the flare at the base of the grip to draw it, and then immediately it's not in what I would consider a proper grip. For a utility tool, that's not at all a problem. As a Marshall tool, we'll talk about that. But retention, even after all these years, it's just fine. It's not going to fall out, and it's not going to be a struggle to draw it. It's just going to come out in your hand like that. All right. Stats, build, fit, finish. First off, it's a very light knife. Only 2.8 ounces, 78 grams. Your overall length is 8.5 inches, 21.5 centimeters. And your point of balance is sitting towards the bottom of this top finger groove. Now, is it full tang? No. I did see a question answer online where someone asked Cold Steel, is it a full tang? And their answer was 3/4 stick tang. Now, I have not put this to any hard use. I don't really think they're designed for chopping or batoning with, but I'm going to try using it a bit harder than I have been and see how it does. And some of their Lite series knives are actually full tang. We'll talk about those later. Stay tuned. But, all right. Your grip length, which is a solid piece of polymer, and we'll certainly talk about how that feels in hand, is very ergonomic. I'm going to give you two numbers. Total length point to point is 4 3/4, 12 centimeters. I'm looking down at my notes to give you the metric as well as the imperial. But this front space here for your fingers, that's closer to 3.5 inches, 9 centimeters. My medium width hands fill it up pretty much completely. Now there is a bit of a space up here that functions as a partial finger choil, and yes, it's straight on the back so I can get my thumb all the way up on the spine of the blade. So for close work, that is awesome. And yeah, we're going to put it to the test doing different things other than food prep. But ergonomics of the grip, for me, wonderful. Now, the width of the grip is about 9/16 of an inch in that swell, about 2.5 centimeters, and the thickness is a beefy 3/4 of an inch, about 1.9 centimeters. The blade, it is less than 4 inches. If you have a carry restriction in your area, full length of blade, 3 3/4 inches, about 9.5 centimeters. Cutting edge, more like 3.5 inches, 8.5 centimeters. Now the width of the blade, it is pretty straight in the middle. It's a drop point, but we're looking at about 7/8 of an inch wide, 2.3 centimeters, and thickness of stock, according to my calipers, is just a shave under 3 millimeters. Now, like a lot of their Lite knives, this comes with a 41/16 German steel blade. It says made in Taiwan on it. This one is a hollow grind. Now, I kind of expected that cold steel would have shifted it like some of their other knives to a saber grind, but it does indeed look like the current version is still a hollow grind. If you have another version of this knife that has a different grind on it, let me know. So a pretty high hollow grind with a secondary bevel. My test files are saying the steel is somewhere between my 55 and my 60 file. So I'm going to guess about 57, 58. But I barely had to rehone this knife in all these years of using it for, well, meat cutting through meat, chicken, and such against a cutting board. State of meat razor. Let's take a look at it on paper. Yeah, it's a slicey blade. Very slicey blade. It goes smooth. Yeah, there you go. A little fine. So, okay. How about a little cardboard? Oh yeah, just sailed right through that. And yes, I am going to put it to some harder use. Finally. Pendleton Lite Hunter Pell Test. Edge towards me. Reverse grip. Edge towards me. Not bad. A little slippy. Straight into the redwood. Edge towards me. Yeah, it's extra slippy that way. Reverse. Some stick carving fun in the shade on a hot day. Feels good. Choke up on it. Press on the back. Very slicey. Yeah, it's a nice little fine work tool. I like it. I almost feel like I shouldn't be doing this, but let's go ahead and do a 3/4 inch dry ash branch. All right, that was impressive. Yeah, no damage. Pendleton Lite bamboo test. I'm a little nervous because a couple of knives failed this one recently. Reverse. And looks okay. Summary of test results so far. The heat wave I'm in and out of is still slowing me down, but I am really enjoying all the shade trees out there. Got out a few times. First set of tests, definitely more martial in nature. Stabbing and thrusting first into my Pell, which is multiple layers of thick cardboard backed up by a couple of inches of compressed brown paper bag paper up against my redwood target, and then taking it further into a harder media, stabbing and thrusting directly into the redwood. And I'm going to say the design of this knife did kind of work against it in that function. First off, the tip geometry. For its size, it's a pretty broad drop point, which gives you a very durable tip, but talk about my spectrum of tip geometry running from needle to shovel. On one end, something that's very keen and fine that can easily penetrate into soft media with very little energy. But if it meets any resistance, hits something hard, it could be fragile. Versus something that's broader, could make a bigger channel into the media, but with the same energy, certainly it's not going to penetrate nearly as deeply, but might also impart more impact into the target in doing so, like, well, being stabbed with a shovel. This is definitely more of a shovel. The penetration it did made a reasonably impressive channel, but it didn't go into the media very deeply at all. And yeah, it did, I think, probably in the redwood test, take just a micro roll on the tip, which was pretty easy to fix. But then another problem came up. Speaking of translating that impact into the target, well, it doesn't kick back into your hand. And yeah, I don't think this grip is designed with martial use in mind, both the shape and the materials. Yes, it is very comfortable and grippy enough in utility tasks, but it's not rubberized. That's just textured plastic, and that guard is really small, and this should be a red flag for you if you're looking for a martial use knife. It should have a significant enough guard to keep your hand from slipping up onto the blade, and this doesn't quite. With the edge facing away from me in forward grip, I could lock my index finger against that, and it mostly stayed put, but I did feel some slippage. Made me a little nervous. When I reversed the blade towards me, though, now that guard is into soft tissue, and yeah, I felt my hand going into danger. Reverse grip, kind of similar. Blade facing away from me, I could kind of lock my pinky into it, and yes, I could also get my thumb over the back. Turn towards me, though, okay, it's a little bit softer, nothing really to lock into that guard, but I could compensate, because if you look at the shape of the pommel, the way it's canted, and yeah, it has a thumb groove in it. So we'll talk about that in martial handling, but yeah, I was able to make myself feel reasonably safe. But still, I don't think it's built for that. Speaking of things I don't think it's built for, yes, I tried throwing the thing. And it did okay. I wouldn't make a habit out of it. Maybe that's where the tip got chipped. I have no idea. Wasn't really paying that close of attention. But speaking of abuse, I did put off the next test for a bit, thanks to some post-traumatic stress I got from what happened to a few recent knives I reviewed that had nice keen edges. So instead I went to carving tasks. And one of the things I've been doing out in my yard is finding some nice straight long sticks that I think I might be able to turn into walking sticks for this old man, and just kind of idly carving away when I've got a break. And for that task, this worked really well. It's very comfortable in hand. I love these finger grooves up at the top. Those feel great. Plus I can, put my index finger over the top of that. Serves kind of as a choil. I can press flat on the back of the grip. There's no jimping or anything, or get my thumb all the way up on the back of the blade. Yeah, as a carving tool, it's as good as it is a slicing tool. Now, it may not have as much belly as I'd like, but I still got really good use out of it. So decided to take it a little bit further. I don't feel like this has got anywhere near the mass or the length to do anything resembling chopping with it. What about batoning? I have issues with hollow ground blades and the way they would baton through thicker material. Hollow grind could bind in a material that grabs the knife back. So I didn't try that. Could you do it with something you could actually, fit in the length of this blade? Yeah, probably. But I kept it down to, well, what I did with some similar knives made out of similar steels that I reviewed recently, Peacemaker, the Mora Companion, and just batoned it crossways through about a 3/4 inch-ish hard ash branch. And this did really well. Actually better than those other two knives. So I think in those smaller tasks, this edge geometry, well, was superior, and the edge didn't take any damage at all, and yeah, neither did the build of the grip. And then finally, okay, the bamboo test. I did recently damage some Scandi ground blades of the same size, made out of the same material at the same hardness, and I really love this edge, so I didn't want to do it, but I went ahead and gave it a try for science, hacking and slashing at different angles, including some bad ones, into a piece of hard bamboo to see if I could potentially induce a chip or a roll should your blade encounter something, well, maybe the consistency of bone or really hard wood. I mean, something did damage that tip very slightly. But yeah, the edge didn't take any damage whatsoever. All right, how is it as a Marshall tool? If you're following the channel, you're probably sick of hearing this little spiel, but we got to talk about the driving philosophy of the series, based on the wise words of Jorge Prina, that the best Marshall knife for you, not only the one you have on you when you need it, and I hope you never need it for that, but the one that you use the most for the most things, so you're the most comfortable and familiar with it, and yeah, more likely to have it on you. Now, I do know guys who carry one knife for utility use, another knife as a self-defense tool, but that brings us into the subject of optics, where you might be someplace with people who are really uncomfortable, to put it mildly, with other people having a weapon on them, and some of those people might be law enforcement. So having a blade you can justify carrying as a tool comes in handy. And this one, absolutely, much, much more of a tool than it is, well, martially designed. But does it have any martial potential to it? Well, before we get into that, let's go ahead and talk about carry optics. All right, it's down to the unflattering waistline view to talk about carry deployment, and yeah, carry optics. This knife is not very big. The black sheath and the fact that it does cover a lot of a black grip doesn't really catch the wrong kind of eyes, so looks a lot, again, more like a tool. And I have, at least for this demonstration, experimenting with camouflaging it more, shall we say, by clipping a flashlight to it. Again, makes it more of a tool set looking thing than a weapon set looking thing. But also like the fact that it's got a nylon belt loop compared to some of the fully hard plastic sheaths on knives of this size we've been looking at. Now, it's not very long, but it is long enough that when I sit down it could snag. And you can certainly tell that sitting down is something I like to do probably a whole lot more than I should. But this does move with me and I'm not having that issue. So I am liking it as a fixed blade carry setup. Speaking of which, yes, I've talked about this in previous videos. In my area, I am restricted when it comes to carrying a fixed blade to carrying one on the belt that is fully visible. And this meets that criteria as long as I don't have a cover garment over it. When it comes to deployment though, okay, that grip all the way down into the sheath like that is an issue if I am trying to draw it in a forward grip. Probably just only going to do that if I'm looking to draw it as a tool, because what am I doing? I'm grabbing a hold of that flare at the base of the grip with pretty much just my thumb and index finger, and it's coming out in a pinch grip down at the bottom, which means if I want it in a full grip, I need to have the time and the motor coordination to be able to do that. For utility use, that's not a problem. Under adrenaline, well, and not having time, it's another issue. So what I'm probably going to do in such an emergency, which hopefully will never happen, using thumb and index finger, again, go ahead and catch that flare, draw it in the reverse grip. And it's coming out with the edge facing me, which is just fine in an emergency when I've got a threat probably right on top of me. Let's talk about that. Because of that fixed blade restriction in my area, when it comes to carrying 3.5, 4-inch knife that is balanced for utility and potential martial usefulness, I'm probably going to go with a folder. But at the end of the day, this is 3.5, 4-inch fixed blade knife, and there is strong evidence to demonstrate that even if your folding knife has a pocket deployment hook, that a fixed blade knife can be quicker to deploy, especially under adrenaline. So there's that advantage. But as I've already mentioned, there are some drawbacks to the design of this knife as a martial tool. Can I thrust and stab with it in the forward grip? Yes, but I am concerned with the security of my grip. I'm really going to have to white knuckle it and keep the edge facing forward as much as possible. Also don't have much on the back for any kind of back cutting, but I could hook a reverse stab around a corner in an emergency if I'm entangled or have barriers or whatever. Now I've got some belly to slash with, and it does have a nice edge on it, but I don't really feel like I could rely on that significantly. Well, maybe to get somebody's attention or create an opening for something more effective. Obviously, there's not enough mass to do much with the flat or the back, or even, yeah, snap cut with it. I feel like I got a feather in my hand. Don't feel like that would do much of anything at all. Maybe sting somebody's knuckles, or make them flinch again to create an opening. Not something I'm going to rely on. Reverse grip, though, it does better, but we got to get there first, so let's talk about transition. Yeah, the shape of the grip for pinch flipping it's great. So there's that. Finger twirling, yeah, those relief cuts at the top fit my fingers really well, but it's not a lot of mass in that twirl to get it to turn for me quickly. It does better in the pinch flip, but then of course, you know, it doesn't keep the edge facing the same way for me. Can also obviously do the safer thing, do it in two hands. But once it's in the reverse grip, okay, I feel better about it as a martial tool, specifically in terms of security in my hand for stabbing. In the forward grip, I can lock it in pretty well, plus I have some belly and edge here to do a little bit of slashing with different angles. If I turn the edge towards me, it gives me more cutting action in the stab, and yeah, now I've got the shape of the base of the grip and that thumb groove to really lock my hand in to use it as a close range martial implement. So the potential is there. But again, I just don't feel like it's at all designed for that. Speaking of not designed for it, okay, well, there's no metal sticking out the bottom. You do have a corner here, but it's only hard plastic, so I wouldn't necessarily use it as a hammer or a glass breaker. Could I hit with it as an impact tool? Well, it'd probably be about as effective as one of those cheap plastic, you know, keychain Kubotan things you can pick up. So there's a little potential there. But otherwise, yeah, I'm going to favor this as a tool, and yeah, do not really practice with it in any way, shape, or form, except for the purposes of this video, as a martial implement. But yeah, it's still a knife. All right, I do have more Lite series knives to talk about. I've got more fixed blades and folders yet to talk about. I've got sword reviews I've got to get to. I've got a lot of tomahawk and hatchet reviews to get to. But until then, as always, thank you all so much for watching, following my journey, putting up with my madness, liking, subscribing, adding to our conversation in the comments and other online forums, and I hope to see you back for, well, whatever I manage to get around to next.